good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are. This is Moshe Goldberg. We're starting another one of our interactive internet broadcasts from Noahide World Center, Brit Olam. Welcome those of you who have signed on. We'll be happy if you tell your friends to come on too. As usual, you can see our broadcasts on our website. We are recording them. You can see them on our website after the broadcast. They are also broadcast on the Roku network, on the Menorah channel of the Roku network, through the kind help of Jim Long, who has put our broadcasts up and has offered to help us with this. As I say, call your friends, get them to come on now so that we can have interactive chats also and interactive talking. I want to tell you when the next broadcast will be. The next broadcast is scheduled for 4 weeks from today. That's Sunday, March 17th. At the same time, same station, we'll be putting out notices who will talk and what we will have then. Okay, it's almost Purim. Purim is a week from today, next Sunday. We will be talking a little bit about Purim, probably not too much tonight, but just be aware when it is. Any celebration that you want to do, it's next Saturday night and Sunday. We have one outside guest, and I will be talking also. We have one guest tonight, Dan Marans, who will be talking about the Seven Mitzvot and Kabbalah. And I will discuss the subject that everybody in this world has a unique contribution to make, and I will get to that after Dan. First of all, Dan Marans. Dan Marans is the executive director of the Thoman Institute, which synthesizes Jewish law with technology and modern life. He studied at Yeshivat Od Yosef Chai, which was located in Joseph's tomb in Shechem, and in Yeshivat Hesder Ramat Gan. He received rabbinic ordination from Rabbi Zalman Nehemiah Goldberg. Dan did undergraduate studies at the University of Western Ontario, and he has a joint MSM degree from Boston University and Ben Gurion University. He lives in Bet Shemesh with his wife Ravit, a lawyer in private practice, and their 8 children. Dan will talk about the Seven Mitzvot and Kabbalah.
Okay, good evening and welcome to all of our guests all around the world, the English-speaking world, in the afternoon and evening, wherever you may be. What I'd like to talk about today is something that's probably have a lot of people very interested, is why people would bother doing the 7 Noahide laws, how they're relevant to you, how they relate, and how they change something within you. So what I'd like to begin with is something that was in last week's Torah reading. The parsha of last week was Parshat Truma, and inside the parsha it says Vasuli Mikdash v'shechanti b'tocham, and God said to the Jewish people, make me a tabernacle and I will live within them. And the sages ask us, why live within them? Why not live within it? Why is it written in the Torah in the plural and not in the singular sense? And the reason that our sages tell us is that God is not going to live within the tabernacle itself. God is going to live where? Within each and every Jewish person's heart. Every person has a place for the temple, for God to be within him. So I'd like to begin by talking about where this place exists. How does this work exactly? So to begin with, every single person has 2 parts in their body, in their essence, in their psyche. One is the divine aspect, a spark of holiness. Every single human being has a spark of holiness, a spark of godliness within them. And the other part is the physical, it's the animal aspect of every single person. And these 2 aspects are sort of fighting with each other, trying to get control of each and every human being. And obviously, if we want to be holy, what do we want to attach to? We want to attach to the godly aspect, the godly part. And how do we do that? So, what's the difference between different people? How can we tell how it relates? And how does a spark the difference really is how the spark enters us, how the spark relates to our consciousness and our unconsciousness. So to begin with, let's take a non-Jew. We'll start with a non-Jew who does not have any relation to God, does not do the 7 Noachide laws at all, has no connection. So for that type of person, where is this? Where is this spark? Where is this godly connection? It's hovering around him, but very distantly. It's surrounding him, but it's very distantly surrounding him. What does that mean? What do we call that in Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism? We call it the Or Makif Rachok. It's a distant surrounding light. It's sort of like, if you want to have an example of music, that off in the distance you hear a tune, you hear some music. Then we have a non-Jew who's doing the Noachide laws. And what's this? This is called the Or Makif Karov. What does that mean? It means that we have a sort of a holy light surrounding this non-Jew, but it's very close to him. He can already it already has an effect on him. Maybe he wants to tap his foot or tap his fingers. He can sort of hear it. It's not directly in his psyche. It's not directly feeling his entire heart and body, but it has an effect on him. It has some sort of distant relation with him. It affects his life. And then finally, we have a Jew. And what does this Jew have? He has an Or Pnimi, an internal light, a holy soul within his body. And what is that like? That's like his whole body has become overcome with this musical tune. He's been taken over, mamash, entirely taken over by this music, by this light. And that's a godly soul. And I'd like to try and go deeper into this idea and understand how it can relate to someone, how someone can use the 7 Noachide laws to get closer and closer to God and make himself a better human being. So, in Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, man mirrors the world. What does that mean? So let's start and understand how the world was created, and then we'll be able to understand concurrently how God was created. So in Genesis we begin. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So in Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, what are the heavens? The heavens are the soul. And what is the earth? It's our body. And then in Genesis it goes on to say, and the earth was chaotic and void, and darkness was on the face of the abscess, and the Spirit of God hovered above the face of the waters. So first of all, what's chaotic? What's this chaotic dark void? It's a non-Jew without doing any mitzvot b'nei Noach, without doing any of the 7 Noachide laws. What does that mean? That it's, like I said earlier, the light is going around him. It's a surrounding, very distant light. Right? It's just total dark, total chaos, an entire mess. And then, what do we say next? We say, and the Spirit of God hovered. What does that mean? The Spirit of God hovering above the waters is just like the Spirit of God hovering very closely to a non-Jew who's doing what? How does a non-Jew bring God close to him? He does the 7 Noachide laws. So the Spirit of God hovers above him. And then the next verse in Genesis goes on to say, and God said, let there be light. And what is this light that God just created in our bodies? That's like when God said, let there be light. That's like when we have a light. A Jew has a light in his unconscious. And then the Torah goes on to say, and there was light. That's when this light becomes into our conscious psyche. It has a total connection to our conscious state, our everyday, day-to-day living. So, and how did God create the world? God created the world through something called Sephirot. What are Sephirot? They're 10 emanations of divine energy. And I'd like to very, very, very quickly go through the structure of those, these different Sephirot, these different emanations of divine energy, and then we'll be able to see how they relate to the 7 Noachide laws, and how doing each one of these Noachide laws helps to make our soul get better, helps to make it get closer to us. So to begin with, we start out with Chokhmah. The first of the 10 Sephirot is Chokhmah. Chokhmah is wisdom. divine wisdom. The second Sephirot, the second divine emanation is understanding. And the third one is dat, knowledge. So these first three are like our intellectual. They're entirely in our mind. They're the mind of the 10 Sephirot. Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And then we move down to one more level to the 7 emotional and behavioral Sephirot, emanations. And these 7 emotional Sephirot and emanations are eventually, as we're going to go on to see, against the 7 Noachide laws. So the first of the 7 emotions that we have is loving kindness. The second is might, strength. The third is beauty. The fourth is victory. And then we go on to acknowledgement. And then foundation and kingdom. So what do we have here? We have 10 different godly emanations. And these godly emanations exist within each and every one of us. This is sort of the map, the way that God created us. And each one of these things, for example, wisdom. Within wisdom, there are 7. Within wisdom, wisdom has the wisdom of the wisdom, the understanding of the wisdom, the knowledge of the wisdom. They're inter-inclusive. Each one has all 10 aspects within itself, shall we say. And that's how God created the entire world and every single person. So I'd like to start seeing going through how each and every one of these divine laws, of these 7 Noachide laws can relate to every single person who does them. How we can once again take this distant light and bring it close to us if we're non-Jews, and then internalize it if we're Jews. How we can make it take over in our entire psyche. How we can make it become one with us. So I'd like to begin with loving kindness. So which of the 7 Noachide laws seems to relate most logically to loving kindness? The prohibition against adultery. And I think that we can all think, it's pretty obvious if we just think straightly, but adultery is a perversion of loving kindness. If we have too much love for everyone around us, then that could lead us to do what? To commit adultery. And if everyone committed adultery, that would make the world a very not so nice place, a very dark place, a very chaotic place. So by doing the first of the 7 Noachide laws, by not doing adultery, what are we doing? We're rectifying within ourselves the aspect, the sphere of the divine emanation of loving kindness. And by doing that, what does a non-Jew do? He takes the first step in bringing the far off distant music that he might hear of a far off distant light, this or makif rachok. And what does he do? He brings it a step closer to him. The second of the 10 Sephirot that we're going to talk about is might, is strength, divine strength. And what is the thing we can do, or that someone can do, that would be the most perverted thing about using divine strength? Murder. The prohibition against murder. Right? So if we want to rectify that, we have to know that in order to fix that, we can't commit murder. And I think one important thing to understand is that what might be, people say, wow, you're so lucky, you only have to do the 7 Noachide laws. It sounds very simple, just 7 things to take care of. But we have to realize that each one of these 7 is really power-packed. They're really very expansive, and there's hundreds of pages in Jewish law written and to be able to understand, what does not doing adultery include? What does not doing murder include? How do we do this properly? It's very expansive laws. But so it's not just 7 simple things, it's 7 things that we could really learn about for an entire lifetime. So the third thing we want to talk about is divine beauty. The sphere of a divine emanation of beauty. And this one, we have to think a little bit more, we have to meditate a little bit to fully understand it. Why? Because the divine beauty relates to the prohibition against theft, against stealing. The Torah relates beauty to honor. And what's the greatest way we can honor or respect somebody? By not stealing what they own. And you might also say, why would someone want to steal something? Why would someone have the urge to steal something that's not theirs? And I think that the answer is, looks like the microphone seems to have fallen. Why would someone want to steal something that's not theirs? Once again, because of what? Because they think that it's beautiful, right? So then we move right on to the prohibition against idolatry. Now, what would we think? How would we relate this to one of the divine emanations that we talked about? The Sephirot of victory, of Netzach in Hebrew. So, if we have true faith in God, what's the ultimate victory? The ultimate divine victory, the ultimate godly victory is to do what? Is to destroy idols, is to get over that urge of idol worship. And then, hand in hand with victory, with Netzach, it says that the 10 spheres are basically like a body. And victory and acknowledgement are basically like the two legs of the body. And what's acknowledgement? In Hebrew it's called hod. And that relates to the prohibition against blasphemy. Because blasphemy is a perversion, once again, of the soul's acknowledgement of God. If we acknowledge God, if we acknowledge how great God is, that God creates the world, that God controls the world, that God has everything to do with everything that's in the world, then it's impossible to be blasphemous. You can't make fun of God and simultaneously acknowledge God, right? So in order to get closer, one more step closer to God, to bring that far off distant light, right, that we correlated to far off distant music, to bring it closer to us so we can actually hear it, that it can have some sort of effect on us. If it's happy music, it will make us happy. If it's sad music, it will make us sad. But in order to make that music closer to us, what do? We have to acknowledge God. And in every single thing we do, every day that goes by, we can acknowledge God. We can see that God is there, right? Not to do idol worship by, an idol worship can be following money or following all sorts of different false messiahs, right? And not making fun of God, not being blasphemous. Those two are the two legs that everything is standing on. But then we move down to the foundation. Now, once again, if we said that the two legs of the body were victory and acknowledgement, the foundation is against the sexual organ, right? And the procreative organs. That's where the foundation is. Yesod in Hebrew. It's against Joseph. Joseph, who was sent and was tempted by Potiphar. He was tempted to do immoral things with her, with someone else's wife, but he withstood that. He's the sign of this specific divine emanation, this specific Sephirot. And so what does this go against? The prohibition of eating live flesh. And someone might say, what's the relation? What does live flesh have to do with Joseph? What does it have to do with this idea, foundation of this idea of the procreative organ? So, if someone isn't able to control their urges, right, their animal instinct, right? And in Hebrew we call this organ the living limb. Why the living limb? Because it sort of has a life of its own. It can suddenly have an urge, and if you don't control that urge, you can do something devastating. You could actually rape somebody, right? And the same thing, it's the same type of animal urge that you'd want to run along and grab an animal and eat its living limb. It's not something that has respect for, the beauty of life, for the beauty of things around us. It just has respect for my animal urges. It's letting the animal urge take over the body. And that's why the foundation, fixing the foundation, bringing that specific Sephirah, that specific divine emanation, brings us even closer to God. And then you might have noticed that up until now, the first 6 that we've talked about are all negative. They're all prohibitions. We only have one commandment that's a positive commandment. And that goes against the divine emanation, the Sephirah of kingdom, of Malchut in Hebrew. And what do we have against the Malchut? We have establishing a just legal system, right? And where did we get that from? We actually got it from one of the leaders of the non-Jewish nations, from Yitro. A couple of weeks ago we read about him in the weekly Torah Parsha. Yitro came to Moses and he said, you have to organize a legal system. You have to organize different people to run the country, to run the way things work. And we right now, just to summarize, we have once again the 3 first Sephirot of chokhmah, binah, and dat, of wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, that they're against the mind. And these three, you can only reach if you have if you have an internal light, an or pnimi, a Jewish divine soul within your body, right? But if someone still hasn't got to that level, and they still have the or makif karov, the divine light, surrounding light, closely surrounding them, then what are they fixing? They're fixing the 7 behavioral and emotive Sephirot. Okay? And so while we're on that level, really, you might say, wow, that's like second class. Why would anyone want to be like a second class citizen? But really, I think it's an honor. Why do I think it's an honor? Because being on the level of doing the 7 Noachide laws is really like being on the level of Avram Avinu, Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Why? Because that's what they had. The Avram Avinu, Abraham, had to do what? The 7 Noachide laws. That's what he started doing. And through struggling, through having no relationship whatsoever with God, having once again the Or Makif Rechov, the external surrounding light that's very, very far away from him, he learned from Shem and Ever, he learned from his teachers, and he learned and did these laws and did these laws and did these laws, these 7 Noachide laws, until he got very close to God, until he saw God, until God became one, until he became a light unto the nations, until he started emanating light, right? So every single person who has the privilege, has the honor of doing these 7 Noachide laws, really has the honor of being just like Abraham, has the honor of actually finding God and finding the Torah for himself. And right now, Moshe said at the beginning of the broadcast this evening, is that we're celebrating next week the Jewish holiday of Purim. And on the Jewish holiday of Purim is a very, very unique holiday. We read the Megillat Esther, and in the Megillat Esther, in Esther's scroll, it doesn't say anywhere God's name. It's only alluded to very distantly. And it says in the Megillat Esther, it's alluded to, but the Jews took willingly the Torah upon themselves. They were accepting the Torah and the commandments for themselves. And what does that mean? We already accepted the Torah when we get the Torah on Chag HaShavuot, on the Holiday of Tabernacles, right? But we said on the Holiday of Tabernacles, what did God do? He held Mount Sinai above us. He held it upside down and above us. This screen over here went down, Moshe. He held it above us. And what happened when he did that? We forcefully, we were so scared that there's this mountain above us that we took the Torah upon ourselves. But what's the difference? On Purim, the Jews actually voluntarily took the Torah upon themselves. And so what are we talking about? No, it's back. So what are we talking about? The Jews voluntarily took the Torah upon themselves. And when the Jews voluntarily took the Torah upon themselves, it brought to my mind when I was thinking about this upcoming broadcast that this is just like Abraham. This is just like all of you out there who are watching the broadcast who have the option and have the privilege of taking the 7 Noachide laws upon themselves and getting closer and closer, bringing this distant light closer to us so it's surrounding us and affecting our lives, and getting closer and closer to this godly light and helping us to shape our lives to become more moral and better people. And I think that I'm happy that you had the chance to listen to us, and I hope that you'll join us in celebrating Purim and join us in continuing to spread this godly light.
Okay, a little bit of technical stuff. Thank you very much, Dan Marans. That was very interesting. Okay, Bob Wells says to Dan, I don't know if he's still here, he is. Bob Wells says thank you, and I agree. That was a very interesting talk, including some things I had not thought of or heard of before.